Francis Henry Underwood was an American writer, pro-abolitionist newspaper editor, biographer, and diplomat. Born in Enfield in Massachusetts in 1825, he studied at Amherst College before moving to Kentucky to study law. He would never practice law, however, calling himself a reformed lawyer, and instead became a journalist. In 1857, he became the first associate editor on the Atlantic Monthly. Though in the Atlantic Monthly he butted shoulders with luminaries of his time like Emerson, Longfellow, Lowell, and Holmes, his own output seems far less stellar, albeit according to John Wilson Townsend in his Kentucky and American Letters 1784 to 1912, his Lord of Himself, a novel of life in Kentucky in 1844, was very well received in Kentucky, a state he had quit many years prior due to his distaste for slavery. A further oddity is that certain sources claim that in 1890 he penned Cookery for Working Men's Wives, a guidebook to frugal cooking, though the same book is attributed to another person as well. His best-known book seems to be his autobiographical Quabbin, the story of a small town. In 1885, Underwood was made American consul at Glasgow, and in 1893 he became the consul for Leith. He died at Edinburgh in 1894. His 1872 collection Cloud Pictures seems to be his first work of fiction. It contains 4 stories, with half of the book taken up by the novella The Exile of von Adelstein's Soul, which deals with a baron who runs over the deformed son of a witch and whose soul is cursed every night into the body of the dead youth in order to serve the witch and suffer horrible abuse. It is a very chilling idea, and were it treated in a longer and more detailed fashion, it could well suffice for a whole novel. Unfortunately, the author, though he has the props in place, including a philosopher dabbling in sorcery whose beloved was destroyed by the witch, and a helpful priest set on helping the baron, he fails to use them for long, and indeed the story concludes all too briefly, never taking full advantage of the potential nastiness provided by the premise. The climax for the witch simply dying on her own is not exactly what one would expect either. The next story, Topen Callan, is mostly a simplistic tale with seemingly didactic leanings, where a harmonious and peace-loving people are overwhelmed by a barbaric and bloodthirsty people from the land of Malacordia. This name makes one suspect satirical leanings to the story, but those really aren't there. Even the conspiracy to kill the prince, and later his father, led by his scheming brother, fails to supply much of interest beyond one skirmish where the would-be usurper gets defeated and exiled. What follows is pure drudgery. Herr Regenbogen's Concert is not a story, though apparently it was published by Putnam at one point. It is a dreary slog where several pages before the story proper begins are taken up with empty, hollow, pretentious babblings about the etheric properties and qualities of music, a load of bold-faced drivel that could only impress a suitably underdeveloped intellect, and that purely through sheer awe at all the unfamiliar fancy words and turns of phrase and wide sweeping comparisons employed without really understanding any of them. The narrative itself deals with a concert conducted by the legendary conductor Herr Regenbogen, which is devoid of any real incident. At one point it seems the music brings out to view the true character of the people listening, but despite that being a low tactic worthy of a moralist novel for children, it has no real significance and is over before you know it. And after the concert is over, the narrator simply leaves. A great organ prelude, the final story of this collection, is a little less tedious to sit through, but does not offer a whole lot. A bunch of grand organ decorations argue among themselves, and with Bach about how no one but mathematicians even really like Bach to begin with, and that turns out to have been a dream. Heaven forbid something mildly interesting happens, which also really goes for most of this book.